but that wasn't our objective. Our objective is to enforce international conservation law by shutting down their operations. So we set out to find a vessel that can do that job, and it took us until the end of October. We finally found one, and because a couple others fell through. We got that ship, and exactly 1 hour from now, that vessel will be leaving port, and it'll be heading down to the Southern Oceans. It's a long ways to go, and we're not giving out the name of the vessel. Alex Cornelison, who is the captain on the Farley Mode, when it came into Australia, is now captain on this new vessel, which I can't give you the name of yet. And so we will meet that ship down there off the coast of Antarctica. And the two vessels have come together. But that vessel can exceed the speed of the Nishan Maru. So now we have a vessel that can keep up with it. But the reason that we're keeping this quiet is because the Japanese have a lot of influence, and we found that with the harassment that we received in South Africa, harassment that we've been receiving in Canada and in Europe. But I'm happy to say that the one place that we're not getting any government harassment is here in Australia. When the Farley Road left South Africa, we escaped from South Africa, which meant that we fled the port without clearance and everything. And it was actually quite interesting because they had called a level 2 security for the harbor because of the Farley Road, because they were afraid we were going to escape. We did escape, and they only found out we escaped when they read our press release about it. But when the ship got to Perth without clearance papers, which usually is a pretty big fine, instead of a fine, the mayor of Fremantle gave us the flag of Fremantle and requested that we fly it in Antarctica. And the crest of the city and the Attorney General for Western Australia, McGinty, he came down and gave us his full support. So rather than get harassed, we were actually the most amazing thing happened, though, this morning. After all of this publicity we had with the support from John Singleton and Blue Tongue and that, I got a phone call from Ian Campbell. And he said, Paul, I just want to let you know that the government supports what you're doing.
Goodness.
And I said, well, that's great, Ian. Can I get the coordinates for the Japanese fleet from you? He said, well, we intend to get the coordinates and we'll publish them in the newspaper and you can get it from there. I said, well, that's okay. You can live with that. But he also said that if we get into trouble, need any fuel or anything, we're welcome to use the Australian Antarctic bases. So what this tells me is that public pressure in Australia is now forcing the government to take a more realistic approach to saving whales, and hopefully their talk will evolve into something more than just talk. I've been asking that they send the Australian Navy down, or the New Zealand Navy, to enforce the law. We shouldn't be doing this. It's not our responsibility to uphold international law. That's the responsibility of governments. And one of the reasons they call us pirates, in fact, when they started calling us pirates, we simply adopted the title and got our own Jolly Roger. Kids love it, you know. But the reason, there's a reason behind that, is that the history of piracy is quite interesting. When piracy was running out of control in the Caribbean in the 17th century, it wasn't brought under control by the British or Spanish governments, and there's a good reason for that. They were all on the take, making money from piracy. Captain Nelson, later to become Lord Nelson, he was commissioned to go to Jamaica to control the pirates. He got into Jamaica and couldn't get his ship out of port because of lawsuits brought against him by British merchants who were afraid he would upset their profits from piracy. He was unable to do the job. Piracy was shut down in the Caribbean by Henry Moore, a pirate. If you want to stop piracy, you need pirates to stop them, not governments. Of course, politicians in the long run are the biggest pirates of them all. But we're pirates of compassion in pursuit of pirates of greed and profit. And pirates have got along, and actually very respectable history. I know not many people are aware that the founder of the United States Navy, John Paul Jones, was a pirate. He was also the founder of the Russian Navy, by the way. After the American Revolution, Catherine the Great invited him to come and form the Russian Navy. So the two greatest navies in the world were founded by a pirate. So like I said, we got a long established history. And also, of course, Sir Francis Drake and Walter Raleigh, all pirates. So people forget that part of it. We've all been sort of influenced by Treasure Island and Long John Silver, who, by the way, didn't exist. So get away from that. But you know, back in 1865, a ship pulled into Melbourne called the Shenandoah. And that ship was a Confederate raider. And that ship, because it came here, and because the American government tried to stop it, and Australians rallied around it, and instead of stopping the Shenandoah, they had a big party for the vessel and sent it off on its way. That ship went on to sink 65 whaling ships. Captain Waddell of the Shenandoah and the other raiders, the Alabama and the Florida, between them, those three vessels sank 250 whaling vessels. The Confederacy waged war on the whaling fleets of the Yankees, and the reason they did that was to destroy Yankee commerce. But the interesting thing is that when Waddell's first officer boarded a Yankee whaler in the Bering Sea, the captain said, "Why are you attacking a defenseless merchantman?" And the first officer said, "We have entered into a treaty both offensive and defensive with the great whales to vanquish their mortal enemies." And the interesting thing about it is because of that, the gray whale, the bowhead whale are with us today. If not for what those vessels did, those two species would have been driven to extinction. But they stopped them long enough for the species to survive. And of course, after the war, they refined petroleum and the market for whale oil was no longer there. But the other thing that I learned from Captain Waddell of the Shenandoah, in sinking those 65 vessels and destroying them, he didn't take a single life. Not one. And that is something that we share with him. Since 1977, when I formed this organization, we've never caused a single injury to a single person. And that is a record that we fully intend to keep. Because you can't go around protecting and defending life by taking life. But it doesn't mean you can't be aggressive. You know, they once asked Mahatma Gandhi, they called him a pacifist. He said, "I've never been a passive anything." Because his concept of nonviolence didn't include doing nothing. You know, he utilized tactics which were very activist and somewhat aggressive and very effective. So as long as you can engineer your tactics to be effective, it doesn't matter how aggressive they are, as long as you don't cause any injury. But then again, we live in a very, very strange society where property has more value than life. And therefore, when you damage property, even property which is being used illegally, that's somehow considered sacred. 1986, we sank half the Icelandic whaling fleet in Reykjavik Harbor. And it was an interesting experience because we got called all sorts of names, pirates, eco-terrorists, whatever, but I couldn't get anything out of the Icelandic government by means of, well, are you going to charge us or what? I had to finally fly to Reykjavik and demand that they arrest me. And I was met at the airport by 150 police officers, and the chief immigration officer came up and he said, how long do you intend to stay in Iceland? I said, I don't know, 5 days, 5 years. You tell me.